The first thing you're going to do to create your design is to click the Create New Design button. And you'll end up with a blank grid that looks like this. Now, we're going to make a few quick changes before we get started on this assignment today. We're going to go to the top left-hand corner and we're going to give it a new name. How about we name it Robot Arm, since that's what we're designing and building. And we also want to edit the grid. You can see right now underneath, this thing is in millimeters. We want to use inches. So go to units and change it to inches. And I like to make mine a 20 by 20 block. You can use your mouse to zoom in and out, which you can also use these plus and minus buttons. Do that. And the most important part of a 3D model is that you can never look at all the sides at once. So if you follow my cursor, you'll see there's this cube in the top left-hand corner. You grab that and move it around to look at the grid on a different plane. And if you click like left once, it'll give you it that from that exact perspective. Top, it'll give you exactly the top view. Tinkercad is all about shapes. So we're going to start by adding in some shapes. The first thing I want to do was build a little model for the drivetrain of this thing. I'm going to use a box to do that. You'll notice when you look at this box, that there's a whole bunch of different dots, arrows, measurements on this thing that we can use to change what we want it to look like. I want to make this box solid to start. And you can also change the color of this thing as you please. I'm just going to make them gray for now because most of the parts, the structural parts that we've learned about are gray. So a typical drivetrain is not that tall. It's maybe only a 1/4 inch. So if I want to change the dimensions of this thing, I want to make it 0.25. And when I hit enter, it'll make this thing a lot smaller. Next, a drivetrain tends to be a lot bigger than 1 inch by 1 inch. There are a lot of you who had drivetrains in the range of, say, 7 to 12 inches. So I'm going to change both of these length and width measurements to make this thing the exact size that I want it to be. The other way to change the size of this thing is to grab the corners, and you'll see those measurements change as we go along. I do want to keep them at 7 and 7. That's another way to get something to be the exact size that you'd like it to be. I think it's a good idea for you to follow along with me and make some similar parts to give you an idea of how we can start to put together what this robotic arm will look like. Next, let's make some other shapes. This box represented the drivetrain. I'm going to make a C channel. I'm going to use this drop-down menu to look at its features. No, don't do that. You will do things you don't want to do on this thing. Guaranteed. And it's part of the process of learning something new. It'll be okay. I'll make it gray again. Maybe a little different color, distinguish it. And C channels tend to be about 1 inch, 2 inches. I'm actually going to give it a length of 1 and a width of 2. And a little bit taller. They can be anywhere from about 6 inches to up to 18 inches. We're going to make like a pretty small robot arm today, so why don't we go ahead and stick with 6 for our C channel for the time being. Now, notice if I zoom in and out, I never can really get centered on this C channel in the way that I want to be. So I'm going to go over to the left here, and I'm going to click the Fit View to Selected Shapes button. I click on this box once, I click Fit View to Selected Shapes, and now it makes exactly what I want to make. Now, in order for us to make a decent robot arm, we're going to need 4 C channels. I'm going to click Control C. You can also use the duplicate and repeat button up here in the top. To make more than one of these. Or you can do copy in the top left and then hit the paste button and it'll make another one right next to it. So now I've got 4 C channels I'm going to use to make this robotic arm. So let's do a little top-down view here. What I want to do is take 2 of my C channels and put them on the drivetrain so that they're able to act like arms sticking up that we can use to put in the mobile part of our arm, the part that's going to spin around a little bit. I'm going to click one of these guys. I'm going to click Fit to View again so that I can see him a little better. And I want him exactly in the middle of this robotic arm and on the sides. And sometimes you need to play around with your view a little bit. Check exactly where something is. If I look at the front, I now have a robotic arm that's sitting up. You'll notice that this robot arm goes down, oops, into our drivetrain. Notice how there's this crossover in the 2 gray periods down here. We can't actually stick a C channel down into our drivetrain entirely. What we want it to do is to rest on top. And that's where we start to learn what some of these other functions on this thing do. If you look directly at the top of this guy, there's this red arrow, black arrow that when you hover over it turns red. That's used for moving parts up and down within a Tinkercad design. So if I click it and I drag it, I can move my part up and down to exactly where I want it to be. And in the bottom right-hand corner, notice I've got 0 here. Now it's over 1. Now it's at 2. It'll tell me exactly how far I am from where I started. We had made our drivetrain 0.25 inches. So I'm going to get this thing so it's exactly a quarter off the ground. And when I let go, now it's lined up perfectly on my design. This is where it also starts to get fun. Look at your cursor. And in the top right-hand corner, there's this button that says Align. Now, getting this exactly in the middle was kind of an annoying task. So what I can do is I can highlight both of these things if I click on both in succession. You hold down the Shift key while you click both of them. Hold down the Shift key. It'll highlight both of these things. And then if you click the Align button, it's going to give you a bunch of options. So, first way that I can align this thing is by moving it so it's exactly parallel. The other thing I can do is if I click this button in the middle, It'll move it up so that this thing is perfectly aligned. And then without clicking any of the buttons, I can take this thing and drag it perfectly horizontally. Now I've got two arms that are in the exact same space on this thing on top in the way that we want it to be. Now, a few other of the interesting features on this thing. When we looked at our robot arm design, we saw that it features a robot that has some C channels. This one only has one, but we're going to give ours two, sticking out at an angle from the original design component. Again, sticking out at an angle from the original design component. We are going to take these other C channels that we've produced. We're going to use these sets of arrows that are on top. You'll notice there are three sets of arrows. And when I hover over them, it gives me a certain angle that I can move each component by. This time I want to select angle that allows this thing to dip backwards. I'm going to set it to 45 degrees. And I'm going to do that both of these C channels. Then I'm going to move each one. They're just inside of the C channels that are holding this thing up. But just like last time, it's really hard to put them in the exact same place. So I'm going to hit the first, shift, hit the second. I'm going to hit my align key again. Selecting this button on the bottom. We'll put them in the same location. And now I have 4 C channels lined up that are going to serve as the basis of a robotic arm. The last thing that I'm going to do to show the basics of how this thing will move is I'm going to add in a shaft. Take a moment and remind yourself what a shaft is. It's kind of the axle through which things move, either motors or gears, on our robots. And I'm going to make it out of a cylinder. First things first, the annoying thing about cylinders is that it doesn't show in the same way that our rectangle does. Numbers you can change over here on the right in order to change its measurements. The way that we have to change its measurements are by hovering over these white dots. If you hover over this set of white dots on the side, you'll notice it'll tell you that this thing has a diameter of 1. So find that measurement on the side that says 1, change it so it says 0.25. You'll notice I now have a non-even cylinder. So because I only changed one set of measurements while the other is still set to 1. I'm going to change the other to 0.25. So this thing is nice and small. Then I'm going to change its angle so I can look at it straight on. This on the right is also set to just 1 inch. Make it 5. This is the end of our first demonstration video. In the next video, we'll just talk about how to put this cylinder in place and how we're going to finalize the basics of this design. At this point, make sure that you've got your drivetrain and your first 2 channels in the proper location, and that you've made a cylinder that looks like this. Feel free to look back at the video if you need any more advice.